We are live. Gonna let some people hop back on here, guys. Thanks for putting up with that. Sorry about that. That's usually if it mutes, you can just click the unmute button. George, are you there? Can you hear us?
Oh, yeah, could you?
All right, we got you
Yep,
loud
we
and clear
got you.
now. We got you loud and clear. Awesome. Well, guys, sorry about that. I'm not going to do a long intro again, but thank you for tuning into Eastern Current. Little short. I'm going to shorten it down for you.
Okay.
Cameron fished today. I fished today. Check out Patreon. Thanks for tuning into Eastern Current. Got a great guest. It's George Poveromo. What's going on, George?
Well, excited to be here with you guys, and especially now that we can talk.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to blame that on the coronavirus, I think. I think it's getting in our
You got
computers
it.
and messing
Everything
everything up. Well, cool. Well, guys, thanks again for putting up with that. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Billy, sorry for not picking the phone up. I saw that you called in, but I was like, I'm going to figure this one out without Billy. I think I can do it. Billy's my buddy that helps me with all the tech stuff and helped me start. He's a current, and it was just I muted it beforehand, and it didn't want to come unmuted. But well, awesome, George. Thanks for tuning in, and I'm a little flustered. Give me just a second, and I'll settle back down. But yeah, we're just super excited for the show. How have you been?
Been good. A little bit of a downtime now. We're sort of in between our normal deal. We finished the Saltwater Sportsman Seminar Series the last Saturday in February, and we get back to shooting our television programming for 2021 in May. So we have that little month or two or three cushion here to get refocused for TV, go through your tackle, get the boats all dialed in and what we need to do. And it just timing-wise worked out because you get this crazy Corona deal here that's pretty much keeping everybody under lock and key for about 3 to 4 weeks or 6 weeks. So from a timing standpoint, on my end, the break worked out good. I'm not really missing anything on either end, but we'll see what happens come May.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we were talking about that before the show. It couldn't have worked out any better. That's awesome. And getting those seminar series wrapped up early, I mean, that would have been a huge hit if you wouldn't have been able to travel to all those shows and all those people that are looking forward to hearing from y'all talking. And I'm just so thankful that y'all were able to get it all in. I'm looking here at the comments, and I guess people could hear both of us, but I couldn't hear you. So it would have been very hard to have a conversation. We could have guessed what each other were saying, or I could have guessed what you were saying.
And that could put more challenge to the show.
Yeah, maybe so.
Yeah.
Just guessing through a whole conversation. Well, cool. Well, what we usually do is we start with, I'm going to switch back over here. We start with kind of just the basic question of how did you get into fishing? Like, I know you grew up in South Florida, but kind of take us through that journey of your first time that you fished and kind of how you fell in love with it and to where you are today.
Sure. And the credit goes to my father. He was a dentist in Bay Harbor Islands, which is Miami Beach area, and his passion was fishing. So I think it was probably the age of 5 or 6 in there that he would take me to the little seawall in Biscayne Bay with a little tiny rod and reel, little pieces of shrimp, and I would catch these tiny little grunts, tiny little mangrove snapper, which goldfish were bigger than them. But it was just that excitement of doing that just, oh my God, it was just something that just got in my soul.
Right.
And from that point on, it was just fishing. I always had to fish. And he had a boat, and we would fish Biscayne Bay for tarpon, snook. And his favorite spot to fish was the Marquesas, the islands, which are about 28 miles west of Key West. He loved the bottom fish for groupers and snappers. And ever since I could remember as a kid, we'd go down there, and we would fish that place, forever. And to this day, I still get down there at least once a year to fish. But it goes with him, the credit. Somehow I just latched on into fishing. And then my grandfather on Sundays, when I wasn't out with my dad, he would take me canal bank fishing. We'd walk to different canal banks to catch largemouth bass. So growing up, that's all I wanted to do. I never played sports in school because all I wanted to do was get home, start walking the local canal banks and try to catch bass and fish. And it was just weird that I was able to turn this lifelong passion that got in your soul into a livelihood. So I know that's sort of a long-winded answer, but it started with my father and just spiraled out of control from there.
That's awesome. It shows how important it is for as adults and as fathers and as role models in young kids' lives to get them out on the water and get them fishing and show them how fun it can be. I feel like we're in a world now where like people are so sucked into their phones and their computers and video games. But I mean, I feel like if you take any kid fishing, and they don't have to catch a bunch of fish, but you catch a couple fish and you don't make it 100% about the fishing and just kind of just show them how much fun they can have out there. I think that's so important. and we don't have much of that today. How did you get?
No, it doesn't always really stick because then you like my daughters when they were young, I would take them out fishing, they'd enjoy it, but then after a while they just sort of peeled away from it. Maybe later on in their years they'll come back to it,
Yeah.
and I think the other key too is when you're starting off with a youngster fishing, is you don't make it a hard regimented event like, hey, we're going to get out there and stay all day. We got to catch fish. You let them set the pace.
Mm-hmm.
You try to take them to some area where they can catch some snappers or blue runners or jacks. Let them pull on it. But once they get tired, yes, you want to go for a boat ride. So you take them for a boat ride. Then you point out the wildlife around the way, and you make it more of an adventure. Because the first time, I think, if you really make it a hardcore deal at a young age, they're going to equate that to, I don't want to go out there. That's just long days and boring and that. So it's all how you bring it up and spoon feed it to them as well, I think.
Yeah, I feel like that would be something that I would be bad at because when I go fishing, it's only for 2 days a week on the weekends, and I'm like, all right, this is my plan. This is what I'm gonna do. I'm going to fish here for this much time, and then I got to get out of there before the tide drops and blah, blah, blah. If I took a kid with me, I think he'd be like, this is way too intense.
Oh, yeah.
Fish, catch. We got to go. It's,
that's a really good point. And I'm glad you brought that up because, when I think about having kids and teaching them how to fish and stuff, that I hope I'll remember that before I take them on one of the intense trips, I guess.
Yeah, talking to other dads who have done it, they're saying the same thing you are, George. Like, go fishing, but as soon as they're over it, go to the sandbar, go for a boat ride, go eat some snacks.
Sure.
Just
let them swim.
Yeah, definitely. Just add it with other things that they already enjoy and kind of build it into this big fun package for them. But
sure.
Well, cool. So were you gonna ask a question? Did you have something?
Well, no, I'd read something on you, George, earlier today, actually. I think you were telling a story about how you had gone out fishing. I think your dad was gone, and you brought home some mahi, and he was like, whoa, and you were like, oh, yeah, we were just fishing at the bridge, and he was like, you're not catching mahi at the bridge. You were offshore.
Somehow, when you started that, I knew that's where you're going to go with that story there. And I'll tell you how that transpired. As we started growing up, or I started growing up, and I turned 16, I got my driver's license. And at the time, we had a bay boat. It was like a 16-foot tri-hull that we had, and we spent a lot of time bass fishing, but that was the boat that we would just fish Biscayne Bay for tarpon and snook. So naturally, when you're 16, you grab your friends and you take the boat out with your friends. And my dad's cardinal rule was don't ever leave Biscayne Bay, because the boat was an offshore boat. It wasn't a self-bailing boat. It had a 65 horsepower outboard, and that was, we had to stay in the bay. So naturally, we'd adhered to that early on, and then after a while, you're catching these tarpon, you're catching snook, trout, and every time you're running by the inlet, you're looking out there, and that inlet kept calling me. The ocean started calling me. And so finally, my friend and I, we'd sneak offshore. And one time where we got caught, we were bottom fishing, and we crushed these big mangrove snappers. We got a couple of red groupers in there. We did really well. So it was during a weekday. We come home and back the boat in the driveway, and I'm cleaning the fish. My dad pulls up, and he sees this grouper and snapper. He jumps all over. You weren't supposed to go offshore. And I said, no. I told him a little lie. I said, we've got these in Biscayne Bay, because he always used to take me fishing around the Bay Harbor Bridge, and we would catch these little small snappers and little small groupers. And I said, we had a heck of a day. And somehow I convinced them that we caught them under that bridge. So that night, I hear him telling my uncle on the phone, you wouldn't believe the fish George caught under Bay Harbor Bridge. And I wasn't sure if he was playing reverse psychology, wanting me to chime in on it. Then I realized he wasn't. So he and my uncle had gone out that Sunday, and they came back, and they had about a 20-pound black drum. They had a couple nice mangrove snapper, big sheepshead. They said, man, that bridge was on fire. And I'm looking, and they actually caught them under the bridge. So I got out of that one. So 2 weeks later, my buddy and I go back out again, and we go offshore. And this time we put about 25, 30 school dolphin in a boat. So again, weekday, I'm cleaning the fish. Here he comes. He saw the dolphin, and he freaked out. And I tried to tell him that they were caught under Bay Harbor Bridge, but he didn't buy that one. So he grounded me. Not only did he take the boat away from me, then I got my driving privilege taken away. So my mom had to drop me off at school and then get picked up in the afternoons. Now, how uncool is that for a 16-year-old? Get dropped off at school by your mom and picked up.
Oh
So it was
yeah.
a while before I got behind the wheel of anything again. And he finally realized that I'm going to get killed in that boat because I want to go offshore. So he broke down and bought a 23-foot Mako, and that started my fishing exploits. He figured he didn't want to see me sneaking out and getting killed out there one day, which probably would have happened.
That's awesome. So by breaking his rules, long story short, it got you a nicer boat to fish out of.
Well,
Yeah,
because
there you go.
hey, I was born in May. I'm a Taurus. I'm stubborn for Tauruses, and he knew that I would find other ways to sneak out there. And it was just a matter of time before something bad happened. So he knew I was going to do it. So he figured, let's step it up and be safe, and then we could all enjoy that. And so, yeah, in a weird way, but the Bay Harbor Bridge deal worked once for me, and it failed miserably the second.
That's a great story. That's a really good story. Well, so where in South Florida did you grow up? Was it in Miami?
Yeah, North Miami.
North Miami.
And
Awesome.
yeah, grew up fishing the all over North Biscayne Bay area. Those are my home waters, and that's where I grew up. Did all the offshore fishing out of Hollover Inlet, and of course, once you leave the inlet, you'd run south based on where the fish are at, or truck north. But that's where I cut my fishing teeth, and as the years progressed, and of course, I trailered a bunch, fished to make owner tournaments all throughout the state of Florida, and then of course you pick up and start running to the Bahamas because then you realize Bimini's only 50 miles away from Hollover Inlet, and with the right equipment, 50 miles isn't that terrible, and so then you start fishing the Bahamas. So Miami, in my opinion, if you were a saltwater angler, there is no better stretch of water in the world to be than there because you had it all. You had snook, tarpon, trout in Biscayne Bay. You had the reefs or grouper, snapper, cobia, king mackerel, Spanish mackerel, sailfish, wahoo, the offshore waters for dolphin, your billfish, like your whites and blues, swordfish. And then plus, you were at the stepping off point to the Bahamas. You could hit the Bahamas and say if you want to do an international thing somewhere, you go to Miami National Airport, you can fly to Costa Rica if you so desired. And don't forget the freshwater. You have the Everglades and all the canals. So from a fishing standpoint, that's why I would never, ever, ever leave South Florida because you have it all here.
Yeah, the versatility there is unmatched anywhere else. I mean, just such
It
incredible.
Yeah.
And I mean, one thing I did last year for the first time that I will have to do a lot more was the peacock bass in the canals down there.
You were sight fishing them, right?
Yeah, we were sight fishing them, and we were fishing live shiners a lot. We threw the fly some too, but honestly, throwing those live shiners down to the peacock and like watching them see it and come over and eat it was super fun. But do you do a good bit of that peacock fishing when you get down?
Well, it's funny you brought that up because I grew up fishing in the Biscayne River Canal. That was the freshwater lake that we lived about a block over from. And the Biscayne River Canal goes through a dam at Miami Shores and goes into saltwater at Biscayne Bay. So we fished the saltwater side and all for snook. And then growing up, I always bank fished for largemouth. Well, fast forward, I don't know how many years, but we got a hold of a bass boat. And about probably 5 years ago, my cousin and I used to do that. We actually found a little launch ramp. We launched the boat in Biscayne River Canal and we went bass fishing. And we caught 22 largemouth, which I thought was pretty cool. So then I'm hearing these people catch peacock bass there. So a week and a half ago, I went out with my buddy, Carl. We go back down there with shiners in our plastic worms, and we fished. We ended up catching 9 peacock bass and 8 largemouth. And the peacocks were all caught in shiners. The largemouth, we got all but one in plastic worms, and the other one fell for a shiner. But where I was going with this is when I first heard people catching peacock bass in the Biscayne River Canal, I was angry. And I heard about this years and years ago. I said, man, what did they ruin the canal for by putting peacock bass? That was a good place to catch largemouth, brim, freshwater catfish, and now they changed the dynamics. And I was all angry. I figured they ruined it. And then we catch these peacocks. And those things are like Jack Crevalle's of freshwater. They'll pull anything in freshwater backwards. Yeah. And so I found a new appreciation for peacock bass. When I do it, I still want to fish for largemouth because I like largemouth. That's what I grew up on the freshwater side doing. But every now and then when it gets boring, I'll try to catch a peacock, and they're pretty amazing fighters. They really are.
They really are, and they're so pretty. They're just such brilliant freshwater fish.
Yeah, they are pretty. That brings up an interesting topic, though, and we don't have to dive too deep into this because I think there's a lot about it. But as far as Florida is concerned, like peacock bass were introduced. I'm not exactly sure how, but there's a bunch of other species like in the
Yeah.
Everglades that have been introduced over a time period that aren't necessarily natural to that area. Is that right?
The dynamics of the freshwater world, as it relates to extreme South Florida, I'm talking, say, maybe Broward County and then for sure Miami, is changed crazy. Now, again, growing up in those canal systems, you had your largemouth, you had your brim, crappie, freshwater catfish, you had your occasional chain pickerel, mudfish, and a garfish. And that's all you had. Occasional tarpon snook that will come in the dam and go up the fresh water. So then, and I know I'll get this wrong because I'm not a freshwater guy, but I understood that the peacocks were stocked in there to sort of reduce a tilapia. Like the tilapia were really breeding out of control, so they introduced the peacocks to keep those stocks down. So the peacocks took, the tilapia levels had come down, and all the other ones that you're talking about have, from people who have these pet fish, these crazy things, they get too big or they move, they start dumping them in these freshwater canals because they can't eat them anymore. And these things, you've got some crazy stuff in there that I've seen. I'd be scared afraid to touch it. That clown knifefish, I had one almost hooked up the last time I was in the canal. It tried to get a plastic worm I saw come alongside the boat. I didn't know whether to jump overboard and get that. I don't know. That thing was the scariest looking thing.
Crazy looking fish.
So that's the story I thought I heard, and I didn't want to say it without confirmation, but that people were like buying these fish and having them in a fish tank and then being like, yeah, I'm over this thing, and just throw it in the canal, and then somehow it starts breeding.
Yeah, for a number of reasons. The fish might have gone too big, or they had to move, but they figured whatever the reason was that they had to get rid of these fish, and they couldn't kill them, because how could you kill your pet? So they figured, give it a good shot. Let's dump it in the Everglades, canals, and if a largemouth eats it, we won't see it, so we won't feel that bad.
Right.
But a lot of them took, and also in that canal, the Biscayne River, I saw one caught there before, a pirate. I'm sure.
Piranha.
Yeah, it looks like a giant piranha, but it's a pyara. It has these big giant.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And one guy caught one in that canal that was 25 pounds. He brought it to a local tackle shop.
Oh my god!
And I'm telling you, you're out there bass fishing. You expecting a nice, quiet, relaxing time. You imagine hooking something like that and seeing this. You don't know whether the thing's poisonous or what it is. That's turning into quite the challenge now.
Yeah,
I'm sure. Yeah.
Definitely. That's crazy. Yeah, there's so many cichlids too. There's so many different fish. But
we caught a bunch of those too in the last trip.
And those are pretty. Those are really pretty as well. Yeah, they're crazy fish. I've enjoyed that time fishing on there, and I haven't thought about it from your perspective of where it came from with the really good bass fishing and the crappie fishing and all that. But it's a cool fishery. It's a neat fishery. And I've always thought, man, if I was a guide in South Florida, you'd never have to cancel a day. There's always something you can go do.
You could fish anywhere depending on what waterway or canal, because some of these canals are so far down, it's like you're fishing in a bowl. The wind can blow 30 miles an hour, but you're down. And so if you're a freshwater guy, barring any torrential even a torrential downpour, you can fish. You get under a bridge. Put your rain suit on. But it's all, every single day almost you could fish in these local freshwater canals.
For sure. Well, let's get back into the saltwater scene, because that's what we all love. That's what we're all obsessed with. And so you told us how you started fishing and kind of how you fell in love with it. When did you decide, this is what I want to pursue for my career? Kind of how did that play out for you?
And this comes from the chapter in life that sometimes you just get so dumb lucky and that it's not even funny, because my dad was a dentist, and he was insistent that I became a dentist, and my younger brother, who's 4 years beneath me, would become a dentist. And he had these plans that we were going to end up going to Emory University in Georgia, where he graduated dental school. And me, I had zero interest in looking at people's mouths and all that. I get just freaked out, and I wasn't cut out for it. My brother became a dentist. He's good at chemistry. He's good in math. I'm terrible in math. I have to take my shoes off and count on my fingers and toes to get 20. Above 25, I'm in trouble. My brain does not deal with math, does not deal with chemistry, but it deals with history and English. So definitely wired differently than my dad
Right.
and his brother. So he was insistent that I was going to go to leave, and I wasn't going to leave. I had it too good here with the fishing. I said, no way, and I'm going to go to Atlanta, Georgia. Come on, and to college. So he finally realized my grades weren't there, and when I was arguing, and so long story short, he said we got to become something, and he said how about an attorney? And so that sounded good because when he told me that, in my mind, I had an attorney, but what I was really thinking of, great, I got to stay here and just keep fishing. So yeah, that sounds good to me. You're buying time.
Right.
Anyway, fast forward, I go to University of Miami, and of course, trying to take those courses, I was lousy at that. So my dad figured I'm going to be a lost cause here. So he said, you got to pick some major. So what I did, I picked the easy one. I picked broadcast journalism as a major, thinking it's easy and I could fish. And if somebody told me back then that that's what I would do as a career related to broadcast journalism, I would have called them the biggest liar in the world, because I just took it to buy time so I could fish till something opened up, I could do something. So anyway, I was fishing the Mako owner tournaments back then religiously. We would tow my boat from South Florida and hit the ones in Palm Beach, Key West, Port Canaveral, Florida Panhandle, Destin, take the Walker's Cay, Bahamas, and we did very well. I fished it 6 years, the Mako tournament. We won the Angler of the Year 4 to 6 times.
Wow.
And every year,
That's
Mako
incredible.
Marine back then hosted an outdoor rider tournament where they would invite 15 of the top fishing riders from the big magazines on all expense paid weekend for Mako. And it would take them away for 7 days and have them fish Mako boats. And it's the greatest PR thing for Mako because all the riders wrote a story and they all took boat-to-boat pictures of these big fish on Makos. So it was my senior year of college. And Bill Monroe, who was the marketing director for Mako, had asked me, would you take your boat to Walker's Cay, Bahamas and help me fish some of these outdoor riders? And I said, absolutely. So I met Frank Sargent in Outdoor Life at the time. I met the guys from Saltwater Sportsman. And Frank Sargent knew that I did a lot of sail fishing out of Palm Beach in the winter. He says, why don't you try your hand writing a story for Outdoor Life? And I said, Frank, I said, I don't even know if I could write. He said, well, try it. Put a sailfish story together. If it's bad, we just won't use it. But if it's good, we'll polish it up and run it. So I did. And the first story I ever sold went to Outdoor Life. And they were among the highest paying magazines. I got a check for $300. I thought I was going to retire for the rest of my life. and then later, Barry Gibson, the Saltwater Sportsman, asked me to, write a kingfish story, and I did. And after I graduated, about a half year later, he wanted to know how are things going, and he said, "Would you be interested in working for Saltwater Sportsman?" I said, "Yeah." So they flew me to Boston, which was the headquarters then, and did an interview, and that was in 1983. And to this day, I'm still a masthead editor with Saltwater Sportsman magazine.
Awesome.
But it was because of the Mako connection. Now, my dad, when we were going to step up and get that 23-footer and get out of the bay boat, I wanted a Mako. My dad wanted to get an Aquasport because his Bob Hughes, the dealer, and a friend of ours dealt with Aquasports. And I argued, and he wanted to go with Aquasports, and somehow I convinced him to go Mako after a long, drawn-out debates, I should say. This went on for a while. And had my dad won and bought the Aquasport, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you now. It was just the dumb luck of him buying the Mako, me doing the Mako tournaments, meeting their marketing person who brought me to fish an outdoor rider tournament where I met these fishing riders who then asked me to do some work for them, which later transpired into a position with Saltwater Sportsman. It's like I said, you couldn't write this thing in a crazy script.
It was meant to be.
It was just one of these dumb things that just, it's even hard to describe. I'd love to tell you that it was just so brilliant that they just jumped on it. It was just a luck kind of a deal that it all came together, and I was just, passionate about it. It's my passion, and so was able to make a good career because of it. But that's how the weirdness started, and that's how I got to where I am today.
Yeah, that's a great story.
Quite a story. Yeah.
I think that's better than the humbleness behind it of saying it was just kind of luck, and I kept wanting to fish. I think that's how most people build a fishing career, is like they really just want to be on the water fishing.
And that's all I wanted to do.
Yeah,
I didn't care if I got a job out, whatever it was doing. My whole goal was just to get a job where I could make enough money, where I could go fish for a couple of days each week, and that's all I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And that's what was, was the passion thing. And then it just worked out. I just think in a lot of cases, and a lot of these things are just breaks. Sometimes you just meet the right people, you cross the right person, and just dynamics take over. Like I said, there's really no explanation for how it works. So it's like a fumble, basically.
Yeah.
But that football fumbles, and every now and then you get lucky and you come up with the ball.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's kind of dive into your fishing down there and what you do. So if you've got perfect conditions, it's going to be, you can go do anything. You can run offshore, you can fish inshore, you can do whatever you want to do. What is your go-to? What's your favorite?
All right, and this is just so you know, I'm taking a sip of water. It's not moonshine.
It looks like moon. It's in a mason jar. I don't know if I can trust it.
Knock out the coronavirus. I got to purify yourself from the inside.
There you go.
So the question was, given the perfect conditions,
yep,
what would be
your go-to? Like, what's your favorite thing to do if you could go do anything?
Offshore.
Without
a doubt, offshore. And if I had to really narrow it down, which would be difficult to do, but if I had to, it would be chasing dolphin. I think that is the most exciting form because you could do it in several different ways. And I think there's nothing really more beautiful than to be out there in a flat, calm ocean, 30 miles away, not another boat, and you're trolling down alongside a weed line. And it's so calm that you can see any ripple. Then all of a sudden you see a wake pushing in, charging out of those weeds, going to one of your outrigger value, and boom, it gets hit, and you got a 30-pound bull dolphin. It just an intriguing sight. Then you could just run around all the ocean looking for them under birds and looking for debris.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say dolphin. That's the one that really moves me the most. And if I could only do one species the rest of my life, put me out there with dolphin.
That's cool.
One thing about dolphin too that's really cool is that, like, one, they're sight fishable.
Yeah.
If you can find the weed lines or something that they're hanging underneath. And two, something I've seen videos of, but I've never done personally, but it looks absolutely amazing, is if, like, I don't know if you do when you're trolling and you reel one in and you got them next to the boat and then all of a sudden a bunch of them show up, or you're bottom fishing and you catch one bottom fishing and then you reel it up and there's a bunch of dolphin with it. But I've seen videos of boats just sitting still, either anchored or something, and there's just dolphin going crazy all around the boat. And they're just pitching baits to them one after the other.
It happens quite frequently, and that's when you hit a school of dolphin. And really, when you go looking for dolphin, my deal, I like to go try to get those bigger dolphin. But the goal of probably most dolphin fishermen, and myself in there too, is when you go to uncover one fish and you get it hooked up, and as you're fighting that fish in, the school follows. And all of a sudden, you could have anywhere from 10 to 50 or so dolphin around the boat, and you're breaking out the light spin gear, and you're hooking these fish left and right. And I don't care how skilled or how seasoned of an angler you are, when a school dolphin come around the boat and you're hooking them and you're flipping in the boat, it's a total craziness where all of a sudden you became like 8 and 9-year-old kids again. And it just does that to you. And it's amazing to see these greens and blues all around the boat. It's just a remarkable fish.
So is your tactic for that, when you're reeling one in, you're looking for other fish coming in with it? And if there is other fish with it, are you pretty much stopping the boat and keeping that one hooked and then pitching light spinning gear to the other ones?
Yes, and things have changed. When we go dolphin fishing, we have our troll baits and trolling outfits. We have our pitch rod baits, which we're running gunning, we're spinners. Then we have our school fish outfits, which are 15 or 20 pound test and 12 pound test light spinning outfits ready to take advantage of school dolphin. Now, the cardinal rule that we all grew up on was that you hook one dolphin and you have a school around the boat, you keep one dolphin in the water at all times, and that will hold the school. Years ago, that held true. And now, because there's so much pressure on these fish, that the one won't necessarily keep the school around. So you hook sometimes 2, 3, or 4 fish and keep them in the water, and that will keep the school around. You have to hook and keep more of them in. So what we do is we have a system. When we're in a school fish, we'll hook one, and when he's hooked up solidly, my buddy will hook up. I'll put that rod that I just hooked a fish on in a holder. I'll grab another spinner, hook another fish, and I'll put that one in another rod holder. And my buddy has already put his in a holder and grab another one, and it will have 3 to 4 fish or 5 hooked at the same time. Then what we'll do is we'll rotate. We'll go to the one that was hooked the earliest. I'll wind that in, flip it in the boat, throw the bait back out, hook another one, and put that in rod holder. And we just sort of rotate those fish out. It's like a system, and it holds them around the boat a lot longer.
That sounds like a skill that has to be learned by doing it a lot.
Oh, it is.
And fishing with the same people.
And they're still putting rods under this, and they still crisscross, and you try to put the separation. And ones you let a little bit farther, a couple you keep a little bit shorter. But it's all part of the game, and those are just some of the tricks to keep the school around longer that, we didn't have to do back when I was a young kid, and you didn't have the fishing pressure like we do today. Those fish get hammered a lot, and they get smart.
Yeah, definitely.
So how is the obviously the inshore fishing where you live is really good, but if you had to pick one inshore species to target, which would it be?
Okay, now this is where I go in a sharp contrast, because you would probably think I'd pick snook or tarpon. It would be sea trout. So I go from one extreme, the offshore fish, to sea trout. And the reason behind that is that's what I cut my teeth on as a kid in North Biscayne Bay, catching sea trout. Going out with my dad and later with my friends, simple with a little popping cork with a live shrimp. You would throw it out and you'd sit, and the popping cork would go down. You would catch a trout. And it was all those years spent trout fishing in the bay. It still holds a little personal piece of my heart that I love it. I still find it very relaxing because it's a kind of fishing you can make it as relaxing as you want or as hardcore. By hardcore, I mean you could just try to concentrate on getting the bigger trout, or you could go out there and just have fun and catch these half-pounders or one-pounders and catch and release. So inshore fish for me, you put me down for sea trout.
Gotcha.
I'd have to agree with you on the trout. I mean, for so long I've been so dead set on sight fishing and redfish and snook and I mean, we don't have snook and permit up here, but spending a lot of time and money down in Florida targeting snook and permit and tarpon and bonefish. But I got bit with the trout bug lately, and we have a good trout fisher up here. But I've been bit with like the big trout. Like I want a 30-inch trout so bad it hurts. But it's just fun, man. That trout fishing and the finesse fishing and working a bait well, and knowing where those fish live and where the bigger ones live. It's very addicting. It's super addicting. I was wondering in that Biscayne Bay and then South Florida area, what's a big trout down there?
We're in an area of that part of Miami and in Miami in general. We don't really see big trout. Our trout down there are a half a pound to a pound. You get a 2-pounder, that's a good trout. My biggest that I've taken in Biscayne Bay, and I had it mounted, was a 7-pound trout, which by Biscayne Bay standards, that's really, really big.
Yeah.
I've only seen one bigger than that. My cousin caught an 8-pounder out of there. But if you go for the big trout, if you're looking for the double digits or trying to get a double digits, you would look from the area from Stuart, Florida, up through Fort Pierce.
Gotcha.
And those they get the really big ones. But Miami is more of an estuary, and there's just a lot of small trout in there. And then every now and then you might get a 4-pounder, but those are big trout from Miami's Biscayne Bay.
Yeah. When you're targeting trout down there in the Biscayne Bay area, like in North Carolina, a lot of the areas we're fishing in current, we're fishing on seams and eddies and little edges and creeks. I feel like it's probably pretty different down there. Are you fishing, out in the open flats and stuff and fishing those potholes for the trout down there?
Yeah, we're fishing grass flats and drifting over grass flats or trolling motoring over and trying to find some of those white holes interspersed with the grass flats and trying to get either your live bait in there or work your lures past that zone. And also, too, a lot, tide dependent. When the tide's starting to get a little lower or as it's starting to rise, then you look for these trout on the edges of the grass flats as they start sliding into some of these deeper channels. And you'll start working those channel edges as the water progresses up in there. So it's mainly seagrass fishery and potholes and work with some grass, where it starts sloping down to ledges.
Awesome.
I went to when I went down to Florida to pick up my boat a few years ago, I got a guide to take me out just trout and red fishing. Yeah. And it was unlike anything that I've done around here. I mean, it was like George was saying. He took us out on these grass flats, and you could see the trout. You could sight fish them, and they're just like all this grass, and then there'd be like a patch of like white sand, and there would be like 3 trout sitting in there.
Yeah, that's so cool. Where were you fishing?
That was a place called Pine Island,
Okay.
I
Yeah,
believe.
sure. West coast of Florida. That's a good area for trout, Pine
Yeah,
Island.
yeah, it was awesome.
That's sweet. That's super cool. Yeah, I wish we have areas where the trout will let. And we don't really have the grass flats like y'all have down there, but we have similar scenarios that we get to trout fish, and I really like that. Nowadays, if you're fishing lures for speckled trout down there,
Yeah.
artificials, what do you like to throw?
And when I would do trout, and when I still do it, I'm a top water guy. I love seeing those trout blow up on the top water. I use a Rapala skitter walk,
Yep.
top water plug, and I'll fish that, and naturally early mornings or a little late in the afternoon. But sometimes I still stick it out when the morning starts progressing into the noon time, and as long as I'm getting bites on it, I just it's amazing to see them blow up on those top waters. And sometimes you leave you scratching your head because you'll see a beautiful blow up and they don't get hooked. How
Right.
did they miss their 2 sets of trebles? But I love top water, quite a bit when I'm in that bay.
Yeah, definitely.
And you might catch a redfish every now and again if you're throwing top water. That's for sure.
For sure.
Yeah,
Maybe a big snook.
Well, I guess you'll catch a lot of redfish too if you're using popping cork and shrimp.
They like that as well.
I do like that.
So if you're fishing inshore and it's not trout, what are some of the other fish that you like to target down there in the Biscayne Bay area?
Oh, snook.
Snook
without a
set
doubt.
number 2.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's for sure, because we have big snook in our area.
Yeah.
And because of the rules that they passed, where you're not allowed to keep any trophy size snook, you have to release all the large ones. There's some monsters in that waterway. They're mind boggling, and it's really amazing the size of snook that we have in that Miami area. Amazing.
And I think you and I spoke a while ago, but your trout fishery took a pretty big hit at some point, didn't it?
Well, it did back in the days when we had the netters back in before the net ban. It took a devastating hit. It did all the bait fish in the area down there, which fed a lot of fish. The bait fishing and that the whole South Florida scene really got bad. That not only with the trout being netted and the Spanish being netted, all the bait, it was just devastating. And I grew up like I said, in the bay there, and you could go and you put together 30 trout as a youngster. Didn't have to really try that hard. And after that ban, if you could put together 4 or 5 trout, they would give you a little mention in Miami Herald on your fishery report. That's how bad it was.
Wow.
Then it wasn't that long after they had the net ban that you saw things bounce back. You see just a lot of bait back in the systems. And then after a while, the trout fishing rebounded, and it got very, very good. Now, the latest issue we've been fighting, this has been going on now for a number of years, is the water quality. What has happened in North Biscayne Bay, it's mainly intercoastal waterway, and the flats are grass flats or some scattered rock mud flats. Well, after years and years of all these homes there and the Miami Shores Golf Course of using Ridex and all to kill these weeds, after all these years and years of rainwater washing that stuff into the bay, our grasses now are absolutely terrible. The spots that I used to fish sea trout in North Biscayne Bay, very consistent area, lush grasses, it's mud now. And the North Biscayne Bay, a lot of those grasses are gone because of that. You go farther south in the bay, you start picking up some more grasses, and then once you get in that wide open South Bay, you see a lot more grasses because there's less of that population or that runoff. And people are wondering what's happening to the grasses, and they would early on blame it on the manatees that were eating all the grasses, but that's not possible. And then they finally came to some conclusions. It's all these homes on the water and golf courses using that Ridex to stop when that rains and everything comes back into that bay and it goes through these drains, that Ridex kills the grasses on the bottom of the floor. And that's a serious problem we have.
It's as humans, we love to point our fingers at other things in nature that are causing the issues when really it's just us. I mean, my example is always hurricanes. If you took humans out of the picture and a hurricane hit somewhere and it's not really doing any damage. It might knock trees down. It might do some temporary damage, but most of the big damage, like when we had our hurricane, we had a huge fish kill in the river, the Cape Fear River here, because of all the overflow from the hog farms that got in the water
Yeah, I remember.
and lowered the oxygen levels and killed a bunch of our striper and our big catfish and our largemouth bass. But yeah, and I know that you speak a lot on conservation, and that's just something that needs to be shared here more. And we're really trying hard to push for that and to get these gill nets out of the water, because I mean, year after year, it's just a steady decrease of fish and areas that hold fish. And I remember that you spoke at, I think it was a CCA meeting. It was before
Yeah.
your show last time. Was that a CCA meeting that you spoke at? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
In Wilmington.
In Wilmington, correct. Yeah, that was that was powerful, and to come from someone who's seen it on their own waters, and it's not just this theory of like, oh, maybe if we get rid of nets, it's going to help out.
Yeah, you've seen the devastation it can cause, and then you've also seen it when it's gone and how it's rebounded, which is
plus,
interesting.
I've had the good fortune of being able to fish everywhere. Texas, Alabama, all the inshore shows we've done and the inshore articles I've done for Saltwater Sportsman, you've experienced a lot of these inshore waters. And like I said at that Wilmington that night, North Carolina does not realize the gold mine that they have sitting there untapped.
Oh, man.
If they get rid of those gill nets, the expansive waterways that you have are just custom ordered for giant trout and numbers of trout. Where people, if you had them out of your water 4 years, 5 years from that point, people would not be going to Texas to try to get a big trout. They won't be going to Stewart, Florida, or Fort Pierce to try to get that big trout. They'll be coming to your waters there, because you're going to have the most incredible population of trout and large trout, that just from the economic standpoint of people coming down to fish those, and the hotel rooms, the guides, the restaurants, they're blinded. They have no idea of what's sitting there waiting for them, and they're just, it's crazy. You guys have it.
It's upsetting. I mean, and you say the trout, and I'm with you on that 100%. But even the flounder fishing here, and the red fishing, with the Pamlico Sound being such a large estuary and a brooding ground for young fish. We would just see incredible fishing, and we have great fishing now. I would say we have good fishing now. But if this is going to have to be what we tell our kids one day, like, I wish you could have fished in the good days, when I was younger, it's going to be sad. And so I think as anglers in North Carolina and across the board, we got to have our voices heard, because if we like fishing, we shouldn't just care about our fishing in our state or our part of the North Carolina coast or here. I mean, it should be overall for all the fish, and conservation for fish in general, I think is huge. So
I agree.
It is. Like I said, you talk about you do have good fishing, but you still don't have any idea
what it could be. I'm with you.
And I get questions, some of the commercial guys, so what are we going to do this and that? And the smarter ones, what they would do is they would get a boat and become a guide, because a lot of those more knowledgeable ones, they know where these trout are stacking up certain times at a tide, certain parts of the whole ecosystem there. And a lot of them could be really hellaciously good guides, because they just know where these fish are going to be, work a fraction of what they have to do now. And, just got to polish up on some people skills. But, there's an opportunity for them to get some pretty easy money and just becoming guides and giving up the netting deal.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. There's almost like there's this culture of netting here too, where it's, and I'm sure every state sees it, that where these guys really just, there's guys that are doing it 100% for a living, but and I could be wrong on this, and I don't want to speak out of something I don't know, but it seems like there's just kind of like this, just like we enjoy fishing, there's guys that really enjoy netting, that's kind of their hobby, but it doesn't, when something's, whether it's a heritage or it's sustainable or whether something's a heritage, like there's a lot of things that were heritages that we realize were wrong and that were not healthy for the world we live in, and we get rid of them, and that's the way the world's going to have to go. And I think that's where we're at with nets now. It's like no matter what, if it's a heritage, if it's, people are making a living off of it, it's depleting a resource terribly, and it's time to act.
It pretty much nearly destroyed Florida.
Yeah.
And Florida's a big tourism state, and they got smart down there. People come to all the tourists come down and enjoy the waters down here, and so they finally smartened up. They put it to a vote, and the public voted on it, and it passed overwhelmingly, and that was that. And our fisheries have come back now. Unfortunately, we got water issues in the state that we're fighting, which are pretty bad too. So you go from one extreme like to another, and the water issues are a whole other thing. It's just terrible.
Yeah, it's scary. It's scary all across the board.
And it's tough in NC because I feel like it's such a deep-seated heritage of North Carolina. Has always been this big producer of seafood. But yeah, I agree. They just it's a tough subject.
Yeah, it's a tough subject, and I think one of the issues that we have is, sorry, I keep switching cameras here, that in Florida, I forget the terminology for this, and I'm not very studied up in my law on this, but Florida, y'all were able to vote on
They did
that.
A game fish bill,
The
right?
game fish bill, and the citizens could vote.
It was a constitutional amendment that they put out to the vote on abandoning the nets.
And so in North Carolina, we can't vote. It's up to the Marine Fisheries Commission, I believe. And so,
right.
I know if it got put up to a vote, that anyone could vote, it would pass immediately. There's no doubt that it would pass, but we're just, for some reason, our state is different, and we can't do that.
Yeah. Well, my question is always too, and I don't think I've ever gotten a really good answer on this, is that all the other coastal states have commercial fishing as well.
Yeah.
But somehow they're doing it more sustainably.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly, not against hook and line commercial anglers. They're not the issue at all. It's the large scale, practices that are hurting us. But for hook and line commercial anglers, recreation, commercial anglers, they're not hurting it.
Yeah. Hurting it. Yeah, definitely. At a meeting, one of the guys that spoke at one of the Marine Fisheries Commission meetings, he said, "Why don't you just give everybody a MirrOlure for these trout? The commercial guys and the rec guys, and they can keep their 75, do it with the MirrOlure." I was like, that's a pretty funny idea. But well, cool. So we've talked about inshore fishing. We've talked about the trout and the snook. Do you mostly focus when you're inshore fishing down there in that Biscayne Bay area, or do you branch out from there much?
I branch out. Again, that's where I grew up fishing. We shot a number of shows out of there. But when we do our inshore shows, we will travel and fish different bodies of water. On a subject of trout, one of the neatest inshore episodes that we had done is probably going back, we losing track of time, 7, 8 years. We were fishing in Alabama and fishing some of these local estuaries, and did really, really well. We fished these topwater plugs and ended up catching a 7-pound trout, a 6.5-pound trout, 6-pound trout, a couple 5-pound trout, which was really remarkable. It was just, so dead on. And we fished Texas before for the trout and reds there. I fished the northern end, of your state for the big bull reds, Oriental area.
Yeah.
We got back from Venice, Louisiana this past summer, and the show aired last week. We did a show on catching the big bull reds around the Venice, Louisiana area. Mm-hmm. So we do get a good amount of the inshore shows in as well.
Awesome.
So out of all the places that you've traveled with your show, do you have a favorite?
Oh, and there's another question that comes out a lot. Between all the places I fished, between Saltwater Sportsman magazine
and you can't
and
say
a
Florida.
TV show, where could you? And I tell people the same. I said, my favorite area to fish, believe it or not, is the hometown waters at Hollow Inlet in Miami. Because again, when I tow down there, I live in Broward County now, probably about 45 minutes north of Miami, but I still trailer down there a lot because some of the areas, and it's just familiar waters, and you enjoy fishing there. And I think, too, when you really put together some sensational catches out of Miami, you're really saying something. You're really doing something. I like that area. I like the Keys quite a bit. And if I had to pick my favorite spot in the Keys, which is even more difficult, it would be between either Key Largo to Islamorada or for sure Key West. And I'll say Key West because, again, the Marquesas are west of Key West. And so then again, there's the Bahamas, there's Bimini too. And we've had, incredible, fish catches over there too. So, but if I had only do one, I'd have to go the old hometown favorite, Hall River Inlet in North Miami.
That's awesome. I think that's just it says a lot, and I think everyone's favorite fishery should be their home fishery. They should the pride and the respect for that water. It might not be the most productive water, but I mean it's just cool to really love that home water. It's easy to always think the grass is greener. Go fish somewhere else. Go fish in their state. Another part of your state, but there's a lot to anywhere up and down the East Coast. There's a lot of fishing to be done where you are. Don't get too wrapped up in wanting to be in Florida or wanting to be in Georgia. Just pick apart where you are and go from there. But
it is, learn those waters and the catches that you can come up with are, it's special. When you do it in your own backyard.
Yeah, most certainly.
So most of your shows filmed within the United States, or do you go out of the country?
Most of them are in the United States, and that was a show concept. My show now is in its 20th year on TV, and the show concept was because when I was with Saltwater Sportsman, I could fish just about anywhere. Excuse, that's not coronavirus. That was
just you got my computer all germed up.
I didn't want to do the out of the country stuff, which I did a lot of with Saltwater Sportsman magazine, because when I was doing a TV show, my thought was, if you do a show, say, out of Venezuela or Costa Rica, in somebody's mind, that might be a trip of a lifetime to them that they may never even take. They'll watch it and they'll really like it, but it's not something that they might not be, they might not be able to make it happen.
That makes sense.
So I wanted to focus on the recreational saltwater market in Florida, where I consider 90% of our backbone, the recreational anglers and these 17-footers to say 33-footers that do it from inshore, the nearshore, offshore, but majority along the continental U.S., because then anybody can watch that show. And say if we run one on dolphin fishing, for example, out of Miami. Somebody in North Carolina who offshore fishes, he never goes to Miami, but he'll watch that show. He said, hey, they're fishing for dolphin in Miami. I do it up here in North Carolina. Let me see what they're doing differently that might help me out. They can relate to that because you're doing it coastal. Every now and then we'll throw a show in a foreign land. And, we do Bahamas stuff, but I don't consider Bahamas foreign. That's an extension of South Florida as far as I'm concerned. And but we've done a marlin show out of Brazil before.
Oh, cool.
We've done the giant tuna out of Prince Edward Island, Canada before. But the majority is continental U.S. And, that's why I set the show and went for that target audience.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. It's more relatable, right, for
it is
people within the United States to see how you're catching more fish and use your tactics and philosophy to do so.
Yeah, I see that happen with this podcast, too, is the ones that are really listened to and viewed a lot are the ones that are more relatable to more people, here along the East Coast. Inshore fishing being probably, for us, a little more productive because, there's a lot more access. You can catch fish from the bank, you can use a kayak, paddleboard. But yeah, I think that's cool. And your show is incredible. If you haven't checked the show out, you were telling us, I think it was pre-show. If people want to see your show, when does it air? And what is it called?
We are on the Discovery Channel on Sunday mornings at 7:30. Now, after we air on Discovery Channel, that's our main network, we post on YouTube on Monday. So if anyone wants to watch any of our shows to date, they could go to the YouTube and go to George Poveromo TV. And our shows are posted there in 4K broadcast quality. And the networks don't run shows in 4K unless it's a major sporting event. But YouTube runs 4K. So and 4K is just a broadcast quality that we shoot in that you could see people perspiring in 4K.
Yeah.
It's amazing the clarity. So if you have a smart TV and you go to YouTube and go to George Poveromo TV, every episode that we do is in 4K broadcast quality, and you could really see it's amazing with the difference between what you see on the national television, like Discovery, which is a first-rate network, versus the quality difference on YouTube. And you think it'd be the other way around, but
Right.
but Discovery Channel, 7:30 Sunday mornings, George Poveromo's World of Saltwater Fishing, or you can punch it up on the YouTube. And if they have trouble falling asleep tonight, put on an episode. We'll take care of that right away.
I wish I could fall asleep to fishing YouTube videos every night, but I don't think my wife would love that too much. We had a question pop up on here.
But look at the bright side. If we're all going to be locked up for
might
6
as well.
weeks,
Oh man,
go watch my shows on YouTube.
Definitely. Oh, I watch a lot of YouTube. It's just not when I'm falling asleep.
Yeah, exactly.
But and I've watched a lot of your shows. I love them, and you're so. One of the things I love about your show, and I'm just gonna say this real quick, is you're very relatable and you're very personable, and I think that comes across on your shows, and you're just a fun person to watch fish. Like I feel like I'm on the boat with you catching fish. It gets me amped up. I'm like, I'm gonna go try that here, but definitely check the show out. It's incredible.
That's why Judd went offshore fishing today.
Yeah, I was like, I'm gonna have something to talk to George about. He doesn't want to talk about my dinky little redfish I've been catching. But we had a question pop up on here, and I meant to ask it earlier. Sandy said, "What is the story behind your boat names?"
There's another question I get asked quite a bit. As I mentioned, my dad was a big fishing fanatic, and we nicknamed him the fishing dentist. And then I, got the bug worse than he did. And then growing up, my sister liked to go out in the boat too, but the one in the family that couldn't stand fishing was my brother Mark. And to this very day, he hates it. And whatever reason, he didn't like it, never does. And over the years, like his friends would say, "Hey man, your brother catches a lot of fish. You think you talk your brother to take me out fishing?" So every once in a while, my brother would ask me, "Would you take, me and so out fishing for a day?" And I said, "Okay." And then he tells me, "None of this 5 o'clock in the morning BS. His fishing day begins at the crack of noon. And if nothing happens in an hour, he wants to go in." So one of the funnier stories, I'd taken him out and his buddy, and it was out of Miami. It was an hot August day, and we're trolling. And he said, "Man, nothing's going on here. Let's go in." And say, "Hey, we just got out here for an hour. Let's work. We'll catch something." Long story short, we caught 35 dolphin and a sailfish. My brother's friend got his first sailfish ever, so he's on cloud nine. We come back to the boat ramp, and they're putting the boat, on the trailer, and I was just walking up, I think, to throw something in the trash can, and I hear another boater walk over and ask my brother, "Hey, how'd you guys do?" And I hear my brother, "Oh, we did okay." He goes, "Really? Did you catch anything?" "Yeah." "Well, what'd you get?" 35 dolphin and a sailfish." And the guy's looking at my brother, like my brother thinks that's just what you do every single time you go out. So when it was come time to name the boats, my dad always named the boats after his kids. It was the Mark George. Then my sister came along as the Mark George Melanie. And then as it progressed, and we jumped into that 23-foot Mako in 1977, we decided, what are we going to name it? And I said, well, the only one in the family that hates fishing with a passion is my brother Mark. Just stick his name on there to piss him off, if I could say that. And we did. And that was the fifth boat my dad owned, so it was the Mark V.
Wow.
And then in 1979, we bought the first 25-foot Mako, so that became the Mark VI. And at that point, that's the one we did a lot of tournament fishing in. We had tremendous catches that when we sold that boat down the road and got the new Mako, I was done playing the Roman numeral games and said, you know what, that was a lucky number, and I'm sticking with it. And I never changed that number from that date forward.
That's
so
awesome.
It's named after my brother who can't stand the fish.
That's a great reason to name the boat. We had another question come in here, and we're already at an hour pretty much, and so we're going to kind of wrap up here soon. But this sounds like, and I've never heard this, but this sounds like a story that needs to be told. So, Sabbatical Charter said, ask him about getting pulled in the water by a fish. I think it was a marlin.
No, it's a swordfish.
It was a swordfish.
It's funny. I predicted all the questions you guys are going to ask me tonight.
I didn't even get to any of the questions that I had written down to ask. Cameron's had great questions. We've had some good ones on the feed.
Sure. This was a TV episode that we did. And in fact, that you could go to YouTube. And again, go to George Poveromo TV. You could scroll down, and it's called The Incident. We took that little segment out of the show, and we posted it. And what had happened was we were day sword fishing at Isla, and it was one of those days it was just on fire. The first drop at 1,600 feet, we hook up. I get in the harness because I don't want to do it with electric reels. And I fight this swordfish for a little over an hour. We get him probably 50, 80 feet from the boat. Beautiful fish, couple 100 pounds at least. And the hook pulls. And oh my God, what a bad break. So we go back to the spot, drop down, we hook another fish immediately. I fight that for over an hour. Get that the same distance out, another fish about the same size, and we pull the hook. Now we're doing a show, and I'm totally dejected. And so we go back out, and sure enough, the third drop, I hook up again.
Oh my gosh.
So now I'm fighting this fish for 2.5 hours. And now remember, I was on the rod about 2 hours beforehand between those two fish. Now I'm on for every bit of 2 hours now with this fish. So we're getting him close. He's probably about maybe 50 to 80 yards off. And my buddy was running the camera boat. And he starts to sneak around by my outboards, and I'm in that corner fighting it, and the fish is angling line out. And I go, Carl, what are you doing? I said, stop. The fish is out there. You're going to break the line. We've had bad luck. I said, go around my bow. The sun's at your back. It's a wide open area here, and you can sneak in with the boat and film us from the front side. And he goes, okay. So he starts to back out. And I'm fighting this fish, and we're getting it closer. Still can't see it. And I'm in a stand-up harness, and Carl's easing around. And then the last thing that I see is at a corner of my eye, I catch his boat coming around my bow. And as I go down to take a crank on the rod, his wake lapped the side of my boat and gave it like a jolt. And at that weird time that I was going down to crank the fish, and that wake that lapped the side of my boat pulled my feet in the air. And at that time, the swordfish pulled me into the water. And I always did the big game stuff, and I knew sooner or later, when you're strapped up, you might find yourself in a bad position. So in my mind, I had all rehearsed, how do you get out of an emergency situation? Because when you hit that water, it's the freakiest thing, and you're getting pulled down by a swordfish. You're going to drown. And I always knew that if you hit the water, the first thing you do is not panic, and you slowly back the drag off. Most people would have freaked and not touched anything and would have been pulled down and drowned. Or they would have freaked and gone to complete free spool, bird's nested the reel and locked it up, and the fish would have pulled you down. So I'm going down and slowly back the drag off, alleviating the pressure. I came back to the surface, and I said, okay, now, George, go to part 2 of your deal. Part 2 was to grab the rod, pull to your chest, unclip, and swim out of it. So I'm trying to find the rod, but I can't find it. So I grab the side of the boat. And Nick Stanczyk's up there trying to hold on to me, and he's 85 pounds soaking wet. I'm slapping his hand off of me because if I was going to go down, he was going to go with me, and I don't want to drown him on top of it. So I'm slapping his hand off, and I'm thinking to myself, all right, George, you got one shot to get out of here. And I said, you got to take a breath, let go of the boat, and try to find where that rod is. Fortunately, I didn't have to make the decision. One of the camera guys jumped off the boat, saw what happened, swam over to me. And during the tumble, the rod had twisted around, but it went between my legs. So when I was reaching out there, I couldn't see it. So the camera guy got his hand in behind the reel and unclipped me, and I got out of it. So I passed the rod back up to Nick, and he put it in rod holes to Nick. Is the fish still there? So he advanced to drag, and it was still on. So I swim to the back of the boat now. And I go to jump in, and then I get stuck on the transom. My rod belt is wedged in the transom, and now I'm angry. So what else is going to go wrong here today? So I finally straightened that out, got in the boat, got back in the harness, and fought the fish for another half hour, and finally got it. And it was 7 o'clock at night. We were 40 miles away from Isla, so we drive in the dark, and we got in, we put the fish on the scales, a 256-pound swordfish. And the whole time, and probably through a good year later, if people say, you got so lucky you could have died, I didn't see it that way. I was angry at myself for letting that happen. I was just mad. Until now, I realized that, like my camera guy said, he says, George, if all that could have happened if that rod went over and the braid line wrapped around the rod tip or wrapped around your shoe, you'd have drowned. He would have pulled you down. And now you look back at it, you're pretty darn close.
Yeah.
And the funny aspect of it, one of the camera guys videoed this whole thing, which you'll see on the YouTube, and one of them jumped in to get me. And my wife said, that Kevin, he's a wonderful guy. Look, he's the only one in that crew that jumped in to save you. And I told Kevin, I said, hey, you scored brownie points for my wife. And I told him what she said. And he says, well, don't get too emotional. He said, the only reason I jumped in to save you because I didn't know whether or not you had check signing authority in your company. And I wanted to get paid after that shoot.
Oh, that's
So that's
great.
the story of the swordfish. And it was a freaky deal. And the third part of the deal, which failed me, was to try to get to your pliers and cut the line. But I had the stand-up harness around me, and I couldn't get to my pliers because it was on my belt in there. So that would have failed me. Fortunately, back in the drag off lightly and, worked this thing. And before that, I don't get long-winded here, is I have the restraints that go to the reel down to the boat. In case something like that happens, you won't lose your rod or the person. And we talked about using it for the show, and I said, no. I said, that looks like too sissy-ish. We're not going to put that on. Don't worry about it. We're pros. And I always said, and I said in that clip, I said, you always think that accidents happen to the other guy until that day I was the other guy.
Right.
It was a weird deal, but that's how it happened in the old swordfish incident.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, at first it's just like, oh, you get pulled in by a fish. You don't. When you start to really think about the danger of it all, it's scary, and that's huge. I would have done number 2, I think you said, and just slammed that reel into free spool and backlashed it.
You would have same deal. You would have gone down, and it's the freakiest feeling. No matter how long you've been doing it, when I hit that water, and I open my eyes and you see blue and you're going. And the first thing that came to my mind was, so this is how I'm going to die, because I remember the stories off your coast where the mate would get wired up with a blue, get stuck, and get pulled over and drown.
Right.
And then I said, no, I'm not. Go back and think of your 3 steps to get out of it. And that's what I did. And the other thing I was negligent on back then, which I don't do now, is having those cutters strapped or tied up to your shirt a couple places that you could reach in and just cut. And so if you saw the episode that aired this Sunday, which is on YouTube now, we went to Isla Mirada again and hand cranked barrel fish, and we deep dropped for sword. So if you see me fight the sword from this Sunday, you'll see the cord coming from the wheel of the boat. You'll see the yellow cutoff thing. So I learned my lesson on that one too.
Yeah, safety is key. I mean, it even goes back to when you're a kid and you don't want to wear your helmet on the bike. And as soon as you get out of the cul-de-sac, you take your helmet off and set it on the side of the road. Yeah. I mean, I was that kid, and it's being safe is cool. And so, in every way that you can be safe, I think you should out there on the water. Well, that's cool. We have so many people on the chat that are just so stoked to hear from you. And Tommy Mungo says thanks for all the years on TV. I think you've just made a big impact on a lot of anglers' lives, and we just want to thank you for that and just keeping that fire alive for people to want to go out there and fish and to create memories like you have for so many of us. So we want to say thank you for that and give you the opportunity if there's anything else that you want to share, if there's any closing thoughts. If not, completely fine. But
no, it's just I appreciate everybody out there watching the show, and it's fun, and it's a passion, and I love doing it and love talking to people, and it's amazing that our time had gone so fast. Remember, we're supposed to be in lockdown for 3 weeks, so we got another at least 2.5 weeks to talk right now.
That's true. We're gonna go live every night at 8 for the next 3 weeks.
Let's do it. What else do we have to do?
Exactly. Nothing.
But if I could lead the people in North Carolina, is on one thing is we have such precious resources, and just think if you have any kind of time on the water, and where the enjoyment level that you had and what that means to you. Is just think in terms of like future generations that you would like them, if they had an interest in fishing, to experience the waters as we are doing now and as we have been growing up. It's such a precious resource. It's such an immense hobby that keeps you busy the rest of your life. And, fight for it, treat it with respect, and just try to keep all the fisheries managed to where they can remain at sustainable levels for future generations to enjoy. We go out and we fish to bring fresh fish home to eat. And that's part of it. And that's what we love to do. But I don't really stockpile fish in the freezer. We'll go out and we'll take fish, which is our right to do. But in a lot of cases, we do a lot of catch and release and practice it. And, like I said, going back to the fights you have in North Carolina, keep up the good fight. One of these days you'll tilt the odds and those nets will be out, and give yourself 4 or 5 years. And you're going to swear you move to a foreign country because the amount of fishing and fish that you'll have in that system years will be amazing.
Yeah. I think our goal, Judd's and I, would definitely be to just have that our fishery is better for our kids or future generations than it is now.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's so many little steps that we can take, and I think through Eastern Current, our really main goal is to build this community to have a voice for conservation here in North Carolina. Like, it's not about a dollar bill. My guiding's not about. I just love being on the water. I love sharing those experiences with people. And I want more people to be able to experience that here in North Carolina and every state up and down the coast. So I think that we all share that common goal as anglers and as advocates for conservation. But George, thank you so much for coming on. We're going to close the show off, and like he said, go check out or go check out a show on YouTube. I'm going to do that after this, some of the 4K. Definitely gonna look up that swordfish footage. I was like, you had me on the edge of my seat as I was listening to that story. But thank you so much. I'm gonna switch over to our camera here, and guys, as always, thanks for tuning in to Eastern Current. We had such a fun time with George, and we should have done like a 3-hour Joe Rogan style podcast here.
I'm sure George has enough stories to last these 3 weeks.
Oh, it was great. There was a great story for every question.
Yeah, right. I know.
but I'm gonna just say one more time about the Facebook group, since they got cut off there in the beginning, for our listeners, because this will be the actual podcast version here. But so check out the Facebook group Eastern Current Fishing. That will give you like inside access to this community of listeners and viewers of this podcast to be able to talk and hopefully share information and become fishing buddies and all that good stuff. The other thing was the Patreon that I've set up. It's just going to hopefully help us kind of pay for some of the back end stuff for this podcast, as it's gotten a little pricier. It's a little bit per month, and I'm going to drop the link one more time here in the comments. But if you want to go check it out, there's 2 tiers of helping. If you really love this podcast and want to help us grow it, there's a $5 a month and a $10 a month, which is like a cup of coffee or a burger. And I hate plugging and trying to do this, but it would be awesome to have the back end of the show paid for and whatnot. So go check out the Patreon account if you do love the show, and we will see y'all on the next episode. Thanks for tuning in. Later. I can't find the end button. This is embarrassing.